What's up, Duval? It is Bucky Brooks, and I am excited to bring you another podcast, Bleav in Jaguars. But I'm really excited to bring in our guest, Blake Ruffino, host of Are You Serious Sports and Ruffino and Joe, a college football show. We are going to talk about all things Jaguars, but we really want to dig down into the draft since the Jaguars have decided to be, I guess, LSU of Florida by drafting all the guys. We're going to talk about, you can give me some insight on the guys that we drafted from LSU, which should be phenomenal. How you doing, man? Like, how are you doing?
Bucky. I got to admit, man, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I always love all the content that you put out. So this is kind of a really great moment for me. I'm excited to be here with you, excited to talk about some LSU guys, excited to talk about football. So I'm excited to be here.
No, it's great. So obviously the Jaguars went heavy on Tigers during the draft. When you think about the 2024 draft class, Brian Thomas, Maason Smith, and Jordan Jefferson, all from LSU, come on board, and all are slated to play prominent roles. So before we even get to them individually, just tell me why you think a team would go all in on LSU products.
Yeah, I think because, Bucky, Doug Peterson having the Louisiana connections that he does. I mean, look, let me tell you something about Louisiana women. I'm married to one of them. They're going to love their Tigers, baby. So I do think that Doug, who spent a lot of time in Louisiana, specifically in the northern part of the state, I think he knows what he knows, right? And so when he was around the state, 2017, 2018, he gets – the Super Bowl, then a couple years later gets fired. They move back down here. Well, there was a 5-star wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. who was emerging. So I wonder – now, I don't know this. I haven't talked to Doug or anything like that. I wonder, being around Louisiana with Maason Smith, Brian Thomas Jr., seeing those guys through high school, how much that then affected when he goes to Jacksonville that these two guys are selected. Now, I know it's a big front office thing, but I do think that Doug plays a big role into it. Now, when you can even go back to when he was with Philly, there was a lot of undrafted free agents that they would go get. He went and signed Jalen Mills, if you remember the corner. So there's always been, with Doug, a Louisiana connection that I think that most Louisiana people won't tell you this, but would tell you this off record. They're going to cheer for Doug. Right. And I think that's just the thing because of the connection and how much love he showed. So, Bucky, I don't know what I don't know, but he's done it multiple stops. So I do think that connection here at least helped those three guys in that process.
Okay. So if I told you that Doug Peterson had maybe expressed some frustration at the end of last year about the team maybe needing to be a little more tough, like we wanted a tougher, more physical team that just kind of went about their business in a fashion that was more like a bully. Could he go and get that kind of product from LSU based on the players that routinely go to LSU?
Oh, no. Well, Jordan Jefferson alone. If he just took Jordan Jefferson alone, he got it. But, Bucky, I will say this. People ridicule me so much on this. Brian Thomas Jr. might be the most physical that nobody talks about. I remember – I think we were on the sideline that 2022 Alabama-LSU game when LSU beat them in overtime. Jaden Daniels scores the touchdown. Only way he scores it is because he's literally pushing Eli Ricks, the former 5-star, into the sideline. It's like the movie, what was the Blind Side, when the dude goes over the fence, right? He springs Jaden Daniels. Bucky, he's going to light dudes up. So in receivers, we always talk about what? Hands, can they go up and high point the football? There's so many things that we talk about. Well, what does Doug Peterson like to do a lot too? He's going to run the ball. And so I think that Brian Thomas alone too, he is, to me, the best blocker in this draft that nobody wants to talk about. Can he catch? Can he run? What was his 40 time in the 4.3? So I like that pick. Now, the question, I'm sure we'll talk about this with Maason Smith, I don't know. Right. And I think that's why he fell, because what Maason Smith am I going to get? Am I going to get the Maason Smith in 21, Bucky, when he is almost leading the SEC in TFLs? Or am I going to get this year for the first 6 games where he was invisible? I mean, you could have taken him off the field and it would have given you the same result. Just look at the Ole Miss film. So with Jefferson and BTJ, yes. I think that the record is still out on Maason Smith on that physicality, tough nose. What are you going to get from him?
So what's interesting about that, like as a scout, there's certain schools that you kind of knew what the product is. The product coming out there, like if you go to that school, if you play for this coach or that coach, this player is going to be ready-made for the NFL, whether it's the physicality and toughness, whether it's dealing with the schematics or the technique. Schools and coaches can get you ready. So you've been around Brian Kelly. You see Brian Kelly. I don't know if Brian Kelly has been prone to explosive outbursts down there yet. What's your take on Brian Kelly, and what's your take on how he gets his guys ready to play, not only collegiately, but for the next level?
I think the most organized in-practice coach that LSU has had since Nick. I don't think that it's remotely close, Bucky. So he's given us unfortunately, we have been able to, myself and the team have been able to go out to practice during the entire fall, entire spring. They are physical. I think where Brian Kelly, I'm not going to say learning on the job, he's been coaching for 33 years, is just how cutthroat it is in the SEC at one position group, the interior of that defensive tackle. Well, I'm sure Jacksonville Jaguars fans will say, well, Blake, he just had 3 drafted. Well, you got to replenish this. Ask Kirby what he does, right? Mm-hmm. Ask Nick what he did. I think offensively, Bucky, even when we look into the 2025 draft, they're going to have 2 offensive linemen taking the top 15 picks. They got to get better at one position group, that interior defensive line, and they would fix a lot of things. When I grew up, one of my best friends played at LSU, was number 18, wore the captain jersey. That defense at LSU, you knew what you were getting. I think over the last couple of years, they've lost that. And I think that Brian Kelly, as great of an offensive mind that he is, we saw it last year. I mean, ridiculous. I don't know if they can take that next step defensively. So I love a lot of things that he's doing. The only thing that I push back on is, look, you got to recruit better in the interior of that defensive line, because if you don't, you're going to continue to have that same success. Do I think they get it fixed? Yes. But LSU is a school, they're going to be 9-3 again. And they bust up, and Joe Burrow out of nowhere just, goes insane. Jaden Daniels did the same. So I like him a lot. I like schematically what they do. Offensively, now Matt House is with the Jaguars. He was our DC. Mm-hmm. I did not like what they did. They were playing catch at the line of scrimmage. So let's see how it changes. I think that this year, Bucky, with the 12-team playoff, the people in the Bayou they're gonna let you hear about it if you don't get there. So this is the year for him to really make the mark. Because one last thing, look, he came in here and Ed Orgeron left a very bad situation. 39 scholarship players, John Che Kirkland, the wide receivers going in at quarterback. It was horrible. And I think he overextended himself by winning the SEC West in year 1. So in year 2, everyone expected him to win. Like, hey, man, they're going to go to a playoff. Well, the lack of depth killed them defensively. So I think that they've done a lot of good things, but that interior defensive line has got to be solidified if they want to get back to where they want to go.
Okay, so we'll get to the draft picks, but I think it's important that you made the reference to Matt House. Matt House joined the Jaguars as a defensive assistant. He was the former defensive coordinator there at LSU. He obviously has a lot of intel on the players at LSU, whether they're offense or defense, but that defensive line in particular. So if Matt House knows those guys well, and you're talking about Maason Smith and you talk about Jordan Jefferson, what do you believe the scouting report he gave the Jaguars that compelled them to go get them on those 2 players, Maason Smith and Jordan Jefferson?
I would say that he would have told them on Jefferson he was the best interior defensive tackle that they had the last 2 years. I mean, Bucky, I'd look at Jefferson. He had 16 TFLs in the last 17 games, right? So that's a TFL, almost 1 TFL per game to a guy that was a rotational beast, so 2 down defensive linemen. Well, what's a big thing in the league? If you get behind those sticks, that's a big, big deal. So I think that number 1 for Jefferson. I think the only thing for him is like, hey, man, he's not going to be a guy on 3rd down. He's going to be a space eater. But the guy that you could go get who might lack in run defense, But if you get him out there on third down, can create havoc, that's Maason Smith. Again, Bucky, not good enough in the interior when it comes to the running game. I don't know right now if he can be a first or second down guy. However, you put him on third down and he gets single coverage, all right, now it's on. If it's man on man, man v man, Maason Smith might win a lot of those reps. So I think that has to be the only scouting report he can give him, because it's exactly what he did at LSU. Jefferson comes in, first 2 downs, here comes Maason Smith right behind it. So I would assume, based off of what he ran and what he did at LSU, that's what he's got to tell him. But I think it's difficult because Matt House didn't have Maason Smith or Jefferson a lot. Really, he only had him for 1 year because Smith got hurt in 22 and Jefferson came in last year. So high upside for both, but in completely different areas of what you would want them to do.
No, so it's interesting because Maason Smith was really intriguing, right? So you see the flashes of the tape, right? You see the arm over, you see the quickness, you see him get after it on passing downs, and then you do see, look, okay, how long has it taken him to recover from, you see, the knee injury? Like, when is he going to be fully back? Some guys, it takes 2 years before they're back to form. When he is at his best, how good is Maason Smith?
I don't want to be that LSU homer guy, but he is a top 15 pick. And if you're getting the high ceiling Maason Smith, Bucky, he's not getting out the top 15. All right. Like, so I'll remember probably about this time last year, it was Maason Smith and they were doing some one-on-one stuff with Will Campbell, who might be a top 10 pick, the left tackle. He hits him with a dip and rip. And I'm like, he's 6'6", 320, and so you see those flashes. But then he had a high ankle sprain. Then he had a hand injury. Then he had a quad injury. Then he had a groin injury. So when he's healthy, he could be the biggest steal of the draft, depending on what guy you're going to get. But again, it's tough for me. You know who had the same kind of incident when he was at LSU? It was a guy named Daniil Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
So not a lot of production. They had the same amount of tackles for loss. They had the same number of sacks, literally not making that up. So I look at them and say, okay, well, this has happened before about a big-time upside guy at LSU. I just worry about him, Bucky. He's never had a senior year of high school, freshman, sophomore, junior, where he hasn't been injured. So if he's healthy, yes, I think you get a top 15 type of guy. If he's not, then he's gonna struggle, or he's just gonna have to be, just a specific third down type of guy. I really do hope well for him though, because again, if he is like for the first day of spring camp or fall camp, Bucky, when he's out there being that dude, he can be that dude. But then it's just he's so injury prone sometimes that I don't know what guy I'm gonna get down in, down out. The only game I would say of recent, go watch Wisconsin, go watch A&M, right? I mean, like A&M, they spent a couple $1 million on both lines of scrimmage, so maybe they got some good dudes. So watch those 2 games, and I think you'll see what Maason Smith can be. The other ones, those are the ones. Ole Miss worries you. Alabama, Tyler Booker made Maason Smith and Tyler Booker. It was a Tyler Booker show from Alabama. So, I like him. I really, really hope it pans out for him.
So you talked about Maason Smith being a top 15 player. For a while there, we thought that BTJ was going to be a top 15 player.
Right.
When I've talked to coaches down there, because naturally you do the comparison between he and Malik Nabers. And the one thing that they kept saying about BTJ, gifted, talented, game is easy for him. He doesn't even know how good he can be. So What have you seen from BTJ during his time at down in Death Valley?
Well, we almost lost him, to Alabama. So the first thing was, Nick, thank you for losing for once in your life. Thank you for losing. Bucky, I got to go to the hardwood for this one thing. I went to Walker High School where he was playing basketball. I think it was the state championship or state semifinal. He gets a rebound. He goes down the court. He passes it off. He doesn't want the ball. Game's on the line. It's like they're probably 2 or 3 points down. Well, he gets the ball and he's like, I'm done. Here we go. He goes up, he drives, he goes up, windmill, dunk, bang. I see LSU's coaches with that Orgeron, I think it was Joe Brady and them had just like Brady was still there at the current moment. They get up, Bucky. They walk out. Like this is all we need to see. So I'm like, okay. So I think this year showed what everybody and their mom knew he could be. Now you turn on Alabama. Why did Nick Saban double BTJ versus Malik? He let Malik run wild. So you mean to tell me that the best defensive mind that we've seen, maybe ever, doubles BTJ throughout the entire game, would not let him get off versus Malik? I think the Ole Miss game is the one that I look at and say, look, he had 3 touchdowns. He can high point the yards, but I go back to him. Every single time on those zone reads, he never takes a play off. Like the blocking, the attention to detail. I'll never forget, too, it was a long run, I think, against Florida where Jaden Daniels runs for like 85, kind of solidifies the Heisman Trophy. Bucky, go watch this yourselves, the Jacksonville fans. He tracks down Jaden Daniels. And everybody's like, okay, the Jaden run was cool. But BTJ tracking down Jaden Daniels, like, who is this freak of nature? So I think, Bucky, if he, like you mentioned, mentally when it turns on, it's over. Because I'm not going to say he is the best wide receiver in this draft. I could have seen a team take him before Malik. Because of the physicality, because of what he did. Now, I get ridiculed by that. But again, that's just me. I love Malik, though. He's going to kill me for saying that, though.
Oh man! So now you've opened up a can of worms. Like
I did.
Can of worms that we got to dig into. So you're telling me during the draft process, because we talked about it, people were talking about Malik Nabers being the best wide receiver in the draft, over top of Marvin Harrison Jr. You're now saying me, someone who looks at LSU football weekly, who's been spring ball, all the other stuff, watch these guys develop. You're telling me that if you had to pick one, you might be willing to pick BTJ over Malik Nabers. That is a stunner when it hits the airwaves.
Well, let me tell you again, I'm getting everything. How do I want to explain this?
I was just going to explain. We're going to keep it real. Like it's Bleav in Jaguars. We just going.
What does he not do better than any wide receiver in this draft?
I don't know. I mean, he's
okay. Well, is he slower than him? Well, no. He literally is faster than Malik. Okay. Well, what about the shuttle time? Okay. Well, he beat Malik. Okay. Well, who had the higher vert? Okay. He beats Malik again. Well, we don't know about Marvin Harrison Jr. My man didn't test on nothing, right? So,
right.
If I'm getting the Marvin Harrison height, weight, speed that can high point, but yet physically and I know I don't want to, Blake, it's just underwear Olympics. He does everything well, Bucky. Where if you go back at Malik can go up in high point. His biggest thing is yards after the catch. He's better than anybody in the draft.
He's unbelievable.
He's undeniable. But I know I can get that same exact thing from BTJ. I'll never forget the Arkansas game. I'm like, how in the world is he that big shaking dudes in the open field? It's insane. Now, I take a lot of criticism on that, Bucky, but again, I don't know what he doesn't do well. Maybe he doesn't have the mentality all the time that Malik does, okay? So that might turn somebody off, and that would have to be the discussion that you would want to have. But he's going into a situation where I think that of all LSU players, Jaden Daniels included. Now, Jaden's my dude. We've been here with him. We've talked to him. I think he's in the best situation, and it's going to show that he's in the best situation for me. So maybe I'm a homer, but
no. I love it because here's the thing coming from the scouting world. That's what you have to have. One, you have to be able to see it, but two, you got to have the conviction to stand on it, and you were able to stand on it. I will say this, talking to someone inside the building, when asked to compare the two, they said BTJ is more gifted and talented, but Malik Nabers has the dog.
No doubt.
He was saying he has the dog mentality, but if you gave that dog mentality to BTJ, you're talking about an all-time great.
You're talking about first ballot.
Yeah,
like legitimate.
So I think that is an interesting conversation. This has been a great conversation in terms of getting that insight on all the LSU players and how they're going to impact the Jaguars going forward. Once again, Blake Ruffino, host of Are You Serious Sports, and Ruffino and Joe. Hey, Blake, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing, because this has been outstanding.
Thank you for having me, man. Bucky, I got to say this. I'm going to fanboy out a little bit, man. I love all the stuff that you do, man. I love all the content that you put out. It's been awesome. Your insight to stuff is always fantastic. So for me to be on here with you is an honor for me, man. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll pay it back. I got to go on your show. You just got to just hit me up, and then I'll come on. We'll talk about college football. It's all good.
Oh, come on, man. That'd be a dream come true, man. Thank you.
Hey, man, thanks for coming on. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Bleav in Jaguars. We will catch you next time. Don't forget to subscribe to Bleav in Jaguars, rate, review, and follow Bleav on all socials.